So you're wanting to start milling your wheat, or maybe you already are milling your wheat and you might be a little overwhelmed about baking all the bread products. How are you going to find the time to do all this, especially if you're not already used to cooking from scratch or baking, and then you're throwing in milling your own grains? Well, stay tuned because this video is going to be wonderful. I have a wonderful guest that I'm interviewing. It is Jami Balmet from Finding Joy in Your Home. And I'm really excited to talk to her about all the things with batch baking, making sure that your family can be fed well through the week without being in the kitchen hours every single day. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, you probably already know what we talk about by now, which is real whole grains from a biblical perspective. So if you are liking that, that is your jam, then be sure to subscribe to this channel. In today's video, I'm super excited because I'm actually interviewing someone that I have been following for a very long time. This is Jami Balmet from Finding Your Home. And if you're not in like the homemaking, the Christian homemaking sphere, you may not have heard of her, but you're definitely missing out. So all wives and moms, I think, should be listening to her podcast, checking out her website. But the reason why I got her on this channel to interview is because she also has been milling her wheat and baking bread for the past 8 to 9 years. So quite a long time. And she has definitely learned a few tips and tricks on the way that I really am looking forward to diving in and sharing with y'all. So a little bit about Jami and why she's the one to talk to when it comes about batch baking and everything like that. She is the mother of 7 children. Yes, 7. So she's also a large family. She is a homeschooling mom, and she definitely has some wonderful tips about fitting in baking and cooking from scratch while on a super busy and tight schedule. Now, a few things about this interview is this is not the entire interview. This is a shortened, edited part of this interview for YouTube and Rumble, but the full interview will be only available to the Grainy Bunch, which is our supporter membership group with Grains and Grit. And I will be sure to link that below. So for those of you who are my Grainies and are part of the Grainy Bunch, be sure to check out your member portal for the full unedited interview with Jami. So let's get started. So welcome, Jami. I'm so excited to have you here. I've been following you for years, and I was super excited whenever I saw that you also milled your grains. But then recently I saw that you had cookbooks out, and one of my friends has your cookbook, your first one. And I was able to look through it and actually see that it was all like fresh and milled wheat, which I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I do get questions from people about, especially with milling grains, fitting it in to a busy schedule. And I kind of wanted to talk to you about that because especially you like to bake in advance. And that's something I get lots of questions about. I don't always do. So we're going to talk about that. So first of all, tell us a little about yourself, especially with how long you have been milling your grains and what got you started milling your grains.
Yeah. So we have, my husband, Jason, and I, we have 7 kids, ages 10 down to 1. So we've got a busy household. We do homeschool. So we're in our house a lot, but Jason and I run our business full time. So I am also working while homeschooling, and we have a very busy household. So I am not a mom who's in the kitchen 5 hours a day, cooking all the time, which is what a lot of people assume. But it's probably been about 12 years now that I've really been kind of on my healthier eating, healthy living journey. So I really started down that journey and started realizing the bread at the store has tons of sugar and high fructose corn syrup and all these additives. And then to try to buy a healthier bread is $12 a loaf. I mean, let alone prices today. And really quickly led me to really investigating bread, because if you are going to cut out all bread products from your diet, that's really difficult to feed a family. It's really, really expensive. And like, as soon as I hit that and started doing it, it like unlocked all the secrets for bread baking in my house. And I realized you can actually make really healthy stuff that's absolutely delicious and it's nourishing. So once I kind of stumbled into that, the rest is history. And now we make pretty much all of our bread products from scratch. Which sounds crazy, but it doesn't have to take that much time. It doesn't have to be this big, overwhelming thing.
So what are your best tips for things like bake for those who want to say they've got a Saturday
Yeah.
and they want to be able to feed their family with freshly milled grains, but they have like Saturday and that's it. They don't
Yes.
have time the rest of the week, or they don't want to make the time the
Yeah.
rest of the week to feed their family. So what are your best tips for, batch baking, saving those recipes? Because we all know freshly milled wheat doesn't last as long. So what are your best tips for those who want to do that, bake in advance, freezing techniques, fridge? I mean,
Yeah.
just lay it all on us. What are your best tips?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a few things that come to mind. So it's really how I can make this work with having young kids and with homeschooling. It's enough some days just to make sure we've got dinner on the table, let alone I'm not spending 3 hours a day baking. And so what I really like to do is set aside a couple of hours once a week, which I think really helps because half the time we walk in the kitchen and the kitchen's messy. And then we're like, we got to clean the kitchen before we get to this. So if you already know tomorrow I'm going to be doing baking. So tonight I'm going to make sure the kitchen's reset. It's good. And then you just walk into the kitchen. You're in the mode. Like, I think it just helps a lot. I mean, we all know that batching things really can help with time. And so it helps me immensely to just get in. We're doing a concentrated time. I'm going to whip out all these different recipes and then we're good for the most part with our bread products that we're going to have throughout the week. And there are some things that I'll make here and there. But my biggest piece of advice is, first of all, if you don't have a whole arsenal of recipes that you love, start there. Start by making one new recipe a week. Start by trying to figure out which muffin recipes that you really like. Make a couple at a time. Because when I sit down and do my baking day, I've got my arsenal of recipes. I know exactly which ones. I've done them several times. Like, it becomes a well-oiled machine. So the more you do it, the vastly easier that it becomes. So what I'll do for my baking days is I try to layer what I'm baking according to what's going on with the oven. And so what I'll do is I'll sit down and the very first thing I'm going to do is make a yeast spread, because the yeast spread, of course, then needs to go rise, and then you're going to put it in the pans and then it's going to rise again. So I'm usually making sandwich loaves. So I'll make 2 to 4 sandwich loaves at once. And, that sounds hard if you've never done it, but I just have my stand mixer. And so I throw the ingredients I turn it on, it's kneading it for me, and I can start pulling out the muffin tins and getting different ingredients out. And then it's just going to sit there and rise. And while it's rising, I've got the oven preheating. I'm mixing up the 10-minute muffins, throw them in. Those are baking. While those are baking for 15 minutes, I'm whipping up the next batch. So like there's just becomes this kind of layering in that I'm not standing around going, what am I making next? What's going on? You're moving through them, and all of a sudden you turn around even an hour and a half later and you've made 5 or 6 things, because you can really move through this quickly. And then what I'll often do is the very last thing that I bake is going to be something that's going to take longer. So a banana bread, something that, needs to be in the oven for an hour, then that'll be kind of my last thing. So I can be cleaning up, and by the time we're kind of turning around, then that's coming out of the oven. And so we have figured out the things that our family really likes. So I can do 4 to 6 dozen muffins. I can do 2 to 4 sandwich loaves. I will often I can pre-make a ton of waffles for the week ahead while I'm doing that, because you're just kind of bouncing around to these different things. So what we do then is I don't make that much sandwich loaf ahead of time. I actually do not freeze a whole lot of our bread products. So I'll make like 2 to 4 loaves, because we can go through those. We'll move through those really fast. But I find that there are quite a lot of things that will last a while. So whenever I make muffins, I store those all in the fridge, and those will easily last through the week. Those are super easy. We'll do like Ezekiel waffles with Ezekiel flour. Those easily will last for a week in the fridge. So a lot of those quick breads I'm storing in the fridge, which really help the longevity, and they don't dry out the same way that like a yeast bread is going to. And so I find that if I'm strategic with those, I can stock a lot of it in the fridge. And then I will usually make sandwich loaves then a second time later in the week. Just sometime when I've got a little extra time, because we just really like those fresh. Everybody pretty much eats a loaf when it first comes out of the oven, when it's nice and hot with butter. So and like I said, I actually just don't do a whole lot of freezing. But you can, I'll make our pizza dough. We have pizza night every Saturday night. I'll make my pizza dough during that same time and then put that in the freezer. That's a really easy one to store, pull out when you're ready to do pizza. And when we do, if there ever is some muffins in the fridge that aren't getting eaten, if they're in like a gallon Ziploc bag, I will just chuck those in the freezer because you can easily pull those out later. But we do not often have leftover food in this house very often. Pretty much everything gets eaten before it goes bad. But if you are a smaller family, there are a lot of things. You can make a sandwich loaf, let it cool completely, wrap it completely airtight, put it in the freezer. You can freeze muffins really easily. You can freeze waffles super easily. There are a lot of things that you could, especially for a smaller family, you could make a month at a time and stick it all and make 6 dozen muffins. That doesn't last us a week, but a smaller family, that absolutely could last a good while. Stick them in the freezer and then pull individual ones out when you need it and just pop it in the microwave or the oven.
And the big thing is, I assume that you let everything cool down completely.
Yes.
Before you store them in the
warm
fridge.
is going in.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're going to pause for a little bit to talk about today's sponsor of this video, and that is Pleasant Hill Grain. I love Pleasant Hill Grain because they are pretty much, like I've mentioned before, the one-stop shop for this channel. If there's one place I can send you to shop for all things milling your grains and everything like that, it would be Pleasant Hill Grain. And that's because they carry the grain mills, the mixers, the grains, the bread pans, I mean, the yeast, like everything you need to get started, one-stop shop. And on top of that, they are a small family-based company, USA based, which I know is very important to many of y'all. And you're not supporting those big companies like Amazon or Walmart. Now, my favorite thing about Pleasant Hill Grain is they are the cleanest wheat berries that I've ever had. Their quality of their products is amazing on top of the quality of their customer service as well. So for anything that you're needing to grab, even if it's just down to the yeast or the salt that you use, then be sure to check out Pleasant Hill Grain. It is just go to grainsandgrit.com/PHG. And thank you so much, Pleasant Hill Grain, for sponsoring Grains and Grit. So with that being said, I mentioned your cookbook. So tell us about your cookbooks.
Yeah. So the series is called Finding Joy in Your Kitchen. So a really big motivator is teaching families how we can cook really simple meals, but that are hearty, that are delicious. But we try to flip our diets so upside down. Often husbands are not super happy, kids are not very happy, and crazy expensive, like just crazy expensive. But I am a huge believer that if we just kind of broke down our foods into more basic categories, so we're buying dried beans and cooking with those, and really just learning how to buy kind of the raw ingredients and what to do with those, you all of a sudden you can make biscuits and gravy that are actually really healthy, that are nourishing, and that are absolutely delicious. Your healthy food doesn't have to feel like you're constantly starving on some crazy diet. I think we can nourish our families, especially growing families and growing kids. And so that's the motivation of the cookbooks, is teaching people how do we do this, and how do we do this in a way that we're not spending our entire life in the kitchen. So the first volume of my cookbook is teaching you how to cook out of a bulk pantry. Not that you have to keep stuff in bulk all the time, but what do you do with dried beans? What do you do with different kinds of grain? And then my second volume, cookbook number 2, is From Scratch Pantry Basics. So it's 119 recipes that are all like your pantry staples, how to make them: ketchup and mayonnaise and pickles, all of these things that you can make with really simple ingredients, and do it, I'd say like 80% of the recipes in that cookbook take 5 minutes or less, like super simple things you can kind of whip together. So you can find all of our cookbooks at findingjoybookstore.com. We do only open our store 4 times a year because if we ordered a single copy of our cookbook, it would be $64. So we do open our store 4 times a year. And so our next one coming up will be for Christmas, which I actually have a brand new cookbook coming out that's on holidays and hospitality. So it's going to be all of those smashed together, which is super fun. So that will be coming up in November of 2023.
So for those of you who are wanting cookbooks that are, I would say, easy to do, they're not intimidating. You're going to recognize the recipes, freshly milled flour, and they're going to be good for your family. So I do recommend those cookbooks. They're looking great so far. Okay, so where else can we find you?
So if you go to findingjoyinyourhome.com, that's our main website where we were just talking before this. We're in the middle of this huge, big website redo. So in the next couple of months, literally everything will be there and it's going to be amazing. You can find links there to my Instagram where I'm on all the time. And then we do have a new YouTube channel, a new YouTube show called Baking School with Jami.
And you also have a podcast.
I do, and that's all on there too. We got all kinds of things going on.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jami, for coming on. It has been a pleasure talking with you. And for those, again, check out Jami's social media, her YouTube channel, her podcast, all the things. And I'll have the links for everything down in the description box below. And Jami, we're going to go ahead and let you go. And again, I just really thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was super fun.
All right, so thank you so much for joining me with this interview with Jami. We had such a wonderful chat. It is a pleasure talking with her, and it has been an honor because she also interviewed me and did a podcast. So if you want to listen to the interview that I did with her for her podcast, I will link that down below. But be sure to check out Jami at findingjoyinyourhome.com. Again, I do recommend her cookbooks using freshly milled wheat, which is awesome. And as always, I will talk to you next week. Bye.